We live in a fast-paced world in which advertisers race to keep up not only with consumer behavior and trends, but with an increasing number of digital outlets as well. Scaling an ad campaign for an ever-growing list of platforms is tedious, repetitive, and time-consuming work. This is where Creatopy comes into play. Creatopy is an ad design platform that helps businesses customize, automate, and scale their ad production and delivery, and thus dramatically reduce their time to market. Creatopy is easy to use, scale, and customize for any company size. Create as many teams as you need, each with its own workspace where you can organize your projects and apply brand kits to keep consistency. Easily share your work with teammates and communicate in real time to have a whole campaign ready in minutes. Designing in Creatopy is an easy and intuitive process. You can start from a single size or from a whole set of sizes, a template, or a blank canvas. Whatever you need to get the job done. The drag-and-drop editor in Creatopy is equipped with premium creative element libraries, such as Shutterstock images, stock video and audio, original illustrations, and everything you need to portray your ideas with ease and deliver creative.
Oh, the guilt in his eyes says it all. He's lost control, and he's clinging to the nearest skirt in sight. In fear, he's lost control, and he's telling mama business while he's lost control again. Yeah, he's telling her all means and lies because he's lost control. He's lost control again. He's lost control. He's lost control again. He's lost control.
Vladimir, thank you very much for being with us.
Hello.
Welcome.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
No, thanks for coming. This is the second part of a week-long discussion that we're calling News Rehab about information and how we inform ourselves. And yesterday we had a conversation with Dragos Stanka. We looked quite a lot at the macro level of misinformation and focused on the mechanics behind and the economic machine. So I think we have a good perspective of this, and we're very much hoping with you to go a little deeper into maybe the micro level, asking quite a personal look into your news reading habit, or more like information overall. And the main reason we invited you is because you created this application that is all about gathering information and building it over time, and looking at the difference between short-term information and long-term information.
Yep.
So we hope we'll have another kind of perspective on the subject.
Yeah,
So
looking
thanks
forward.
for joining us. And I think first we really wanted to ask you really a kind of a personal look into how you inform yourself. So even down to your daily habits, your routine, how it works. Is it, what do you do in the morning? How do you process the world? Even down to your device.
Yeah.
Very specific, very in-depth.
Yeah. So to start from high level, I don't actively follow the news. So I don't turn on the TV at 7 p.m. to see what's I don't know, the politics situation or the global situation and things like that. Nor do I go to, I don't know, read some newspapers and stuff like that. But I don't feel like I'm uninformed, because I think if something is important enough, it will reach me. So I don't feel like the news, I'm not surprised by the news. So somehow I know who's the U.S. president. Yeah. So I didn't actively follow the election, but yeah, I don't know. The next day, I don't know, the news reached out to me somehow on the feeds or in the conversation. So what I do instead is, I don't know, I try to follow my interest. I think it's, instead of following the news, I try to follow my interest, and I am actively reading or listening or watching things, meaning that I really pay attention, and then I take notes, and then I try to create some sort of a library in my brain. So I don't want my relationship with information to be wasteful. I look in my interactions with knowledge as an investment. I want to get something in return, but I'm not going to hide it. It gives me pleasure. I mean, I know it can be quite geeky. Probably, I don't know, scrolling Facebook and yelling at this politician who's doing this shitty thing that you don't agree with. It's probably, I don't know, more emotionally rewarding than, I don't know, listening to a long hour conversation on, I don't know, philosophy, or reading like a paper for work. But for me, that's fun, actually. I quite enjoy it. And then I take, I don't know, good notes on Deep Stash, and I discuss it with other people, and we have more meaningful conversations. And yeah, if it gets to news, I'm more interested in understanding what's behind the news. And yeah, I look at the news as curiosities more than opportunities for I don't know, an emotional outburst.
But aren't you a bit worried that, or could people worry that if we only follow what we're interested in, then we would miss out on information that maybe is less interesting but quite vital or important for the community or for the world?
Probably. I'm not here to say, but I think the fear of missing out is overblown. To be honest, I can't think of many examples where, thank God I watched the evening news, because I wouldn't have known that, I don't know, there is a COVID pandemic. I mean, like, Probably, but unless you're a day trader, where I don't know, you are betting on the news pretty much and buying and selling stock or crypto or whatever, I don't see a point in actively following the news. I don't think there's anything out there that will make you live your life better on the short term. Actually, on the short term, we know what's happening. People are getting anxious, they are getting angry, they are fighting with each other. I mean, right now with this COVID situation, the political unrest, I think we as a society would be much more better off if we just stop the news for like a month.
I was actually curious to ask you, like, if you have, there's this term of news rehab, and people do it for a Sunday or for a week or for a month. Yeah, news detox. Sorry, and I was wondering if you actively do a news detox, or yeah.
No, I'm not trying to. No, I'm not trying to hide from the news. I engage with the news. I don't actively seek it. I don't think you can escape the news, to be honest. I mean, like, unless you go on a cave or somewhere, you know, and you cut off internet. But otherwise, the news is going to...
Or you host a festival.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, the news will reach you. That's the thing.
I think that there maybe are different levels of news, because I think the news that you're talking about that are not so informative in the end are the like maybe the evening, the daily,
right,
you know.
right.
But then there's the level of news that are the tougher ones, the investigative, you know, journalism, the things that are developed, like, I don't know, very research-based revelations about Pegasus software, the Panama paper, you know, those kind of big exposés and so on, which then maybe become a bit like essays, or maybe they're actually closer to the kind of things you are actively seeking. So
I'm interested in those topics, to be honest, but I think I'm interested in more of the deeper conversations than, I don't know, I mean, like the superficial clickbaity articles. Like, I don't know, like I think I know what the Panama paper scandal is, but the news framing is more of a, I don't know, the rich people are all cheating and pitchforks, and let's have another French Revolution. I think that's, I don't know, like a silly emotional response. And if I'm going to look into the subject, I will be more interested in what's going on, what's legal, what's illegal, what are the ethical implications, and try to form my own opinion. Right now, however, I'm not that interested, because I don't find that topic to be as interested compared to other topics that I'm interested in. Like, we were chatting earlier, I saw Dune, so for the last couple of days, I'm really interested in the science fiction or the mythos of science fiction in relationship to religion and state of consciousness and things like that. So instead of, I don't know, like watching the news or the latest Netflix whatever series, I'm much more interested in, I don't know, discussions around Dune than the Panama Papers.
Yeah, we see here a tab with Dune and the different
this is your screen, right?
Yeah, I think this is my
I
screen.
kind of
Maybe
picked
we
at your
should,
screen.
Yeah, like for example, I'm finishing watching this interview with a science fiction expert, Damien Walter. So I really like this conversation about Dune and science fiction. So now I subscribe to his podcast. So I don't know, I'm following my interest. I think he had some very interesting ideas. So yeah.
But so all of the, I was wondering if there are any routines that you have, or it's based on spontaneous interests that arise, and then you focus on those interests and see where they take you.
Yeah,
or,
I mean, like,
if you have some channels that you just
I
follow
can
every day.
probably go into some routine. So in the morning, I actually read some light news. Like, I go on this website called Tech Meme. All the tech people kind of visited. So it's like, I don't know, the top 10 things in tech. It's very mostly tech focused. Like, I don't know, there is some Facebook stuff here, but I don't know, apparently Photoshop works on in the browser. Cool, I don't know,
Great.
whatever.
Good to know.
Do you
yeah.
read the headlines only,
Yeah,
or
it's
you
mostly
click?
like I'm done with this in like a minute.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you still go every day.
Yeah, I
Get the
kind
temperature.
of start with this one, and then I have I go to Twitter, and my Twitter is quite curated. I follow, I don't know, I would say smart people and things like that that are not sharing news, but yeah, there are news here. I cannot escape the news, and usually I find some interesting things from Twitter, more like, I don't know, niche things. Like, for example, there's a guy that I'm following who created some organizational maps for decentralized companies. And I found that fascinating. And I think I published something on DeepStash if you're following me.
I definitely follow you.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's a thing that I found on Twitter. And then I took that journey separately. Of course, I read DeepStash mostly.
Should we explain briefly how DeepStash works?
I
Just
Yeah,
for
yeah,
people
yeah.
who don't
We
know
should.
it. I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, so DeepStash is this app where you can have a profile where you save ideas from all the books and articles and podcasts and videos and things that you are following. So this is my profile, by the way. And yeah, these are all my boxes where I save ideas. We're calling them stashes. So I have quite a few. Like whenever I consume something, I'm trying to figure out which box it goes into. So, and I have lots of interest. So, I don't know.
This
And you
time-
really go
Meta
back.
learning, it's
Yeah.
about like learning. I'm interested in how we learn. Mindfulness is, I'm interested in Buddhism and things like that. Personal operating system, it's more like heuristics for living, things that, I don't know, rules to make a better me. Leadership, these are, it's like, I don't know, leading a company, leading a team. I have quite a cool stash with philosophy. This is where I say philosophical ideas that I find interesting. Crypto, I'm into
Yeah.
crypto.
I figured.
Products and innovation, so I'm involved in the innovation ecosystem, so I'm part of Innovation Labs, which is an amazing program, and I also teach disruption and things like that at an MBA. So I'm interested in that, and all sorts of things. I even have a science fiction one, since we've been
Yeah.
talking about science fiction, and it has
Sorry,
And
what
what
do you
is
mean I teach disruption?
I'm a professor, and I teach digital transformation. I teach strategy.
Okay.
Yeah, at an MBA, and yeah, actually I use DeepStash quite a lot because I give examples, and it's easier for me to send people links to
Yeah.
some things that I read. So yeah, they
I
can
imagine
understand.
a lecture of you with like slides full of notes, stashes of,
Yeah.
of deep
It's a
stash.
bit like Jerry's brain.
Yeah, exactly. And I was wondering, how often do you usually read the news or information or whatever source, and then in parallel, or if you find something interesting and you immediately write it down, or
Yeah. It's on the spot. So it's probably part of my meditation practice, but I'm quite self-aware of the things that I like. So I notice my emotional responses, and it's not as philosophical as it seems. It's like, man, that's so freaking cool.
Yeah.
And when I tell that to myself, I have this instinct of taking a deep breath and like, what was that thing exactly that I found it cool? And that creates a form of an internal dialogue where I try to explain to myself what it is that I don't know, got my attention and got my interest. And if I form some sort of a theory of what that thing is, and if I think it's valuable for me, but also for others, I write it down. And in other cases, it's like, it's nothing, or it's probably this other thing, and I continue. But like, for example, we were discussing here, I'm finishing this one, and I took 2 ideas out of this an hour-long conversation, and I didn't think about the mythos of science as being what science fiction is, for example. And for me, like, interested in philosophy and Buddhism and science fiction, this approach seemed very interesting. So writing it down helped me clarify it
Yeah.
to myself. I'm going to publish this on DeepStash, so other science fiction interested people are going to see it and drop me a comment, and maybe we can engage in a conversation. And also, a month from now, when, I don't know, we are discussing science fiction, and I had that idea like a month ago, it had something to do with Dune, but I don't remember it. Well, yeah, I can pull my phone, open DeepStash, search it, and then be like talk very specifically about the topic that we're discussing. So yeah, I'm doing it on the spot.
That's really great. It gives me some inspiration also to centralize my newly acquired information. And I was wondering, is there any piece of news in the last, I don't know, days, week, month, or whatever that made you sparked your interest, and maybe you got to the deeper meaning of it and you started asking questions and you unpacked it and maybe it got here on DeepStash?
Well, let me check to see if there's actually something that could have been worked inspired or oh yeah, probably this one. I think I got to this idea of narcissism from a conversation on the effects of social media, and which was probably related to the Facebook scandal or something like that. But someone there mentioned that the philosophical and the mental problems that are being reflected in the social media today has to do with our narcissistic impulses. And he mentioned that that is actually something that Dostoevsky looked into, and he certainly kind of realized what the problem that we're confronting with right now is. And I find that fascinating. Like Dostoevsky, like the Russian guy, like there were no computers. Like how could he pinpoint the problem of narcissism? And yeah, so I got into reading about that, and I think that I'm smarter because of it. Because although, for example, Dostoevsky didn't have Facebook, but during his lifetime there was this transition from the villages to cities, and people became much more clustered and had to interact with one another, which was a huge transformation at the time. And he looked into the psychological transformation that happens in the minds of people, and came up with what is now considered the modern definition of narcissism, which works pretty well for social media. And I have it right here.
Yeah, there's this interesting stretch of time that happens because, as I understood, DeepStash is focusing on like it's no political or no news-based things, but it's the things that stay, right? So it's what's going to be in the book or what has been discussed before, which is a very interesting choice. And first approach, I would say, how is this possible? I know many would say everything is political or everything, but so it's an interesting exercise to thread.
This one probably started from a political news.
Yeah,
I would say yes.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
It's quite actual. But
and
I
it's
find
distilling the maybe the essence and the reoccurring patterns across history.
yeah. I don't know if I can solve the Facebook problem, but I found out this thing that sparked my interest. I think it's pretty cool. By the way, it makes me look smart. I've only read one book from Dostoevsky, so it's not like I'm an authority, and not the book that actually where this whole thing happened. This is from I think Notes from the Underground, which I didn't read. But yeah, I found these ideas to be fascinating, so I wrote them down and shared them with the world. And yeah, apparently, I don't know, 123 other people read it, and some of them stashed it.
And you said you have some kind of habit about walking and reading, or
Yeah,
which I'm quite intrigued about.
Yeah, I mean, like this is one of the habits that I picked up with the lockdowns. So I got stuck at home. I used to walk to the office. I used to run, but then I got stuck at home, and I developed this habit of reading and walking and reading and listening. So yeah, I walk around the house, and whenever I have a break, I don't go on Facebook per se and scroll to see what's been happening in the last 10 minutes since I last checked. I understand the impulse, but I think it's not healthy for me. I mean,
Yeah.
like, going back to the ideas like who's to blame for this whole social media madness, I think in my case, I'm the one to blame. I mean, I'm responsible for it. So yeah, I pick a book. And I just walk around the house.
And I'm curious, how long do you, a day, for example, you spend reading or informing yourself?
Whenever I'm not actively working, meaning like producing like the document or doing like Excel or I don't know, talking to colleagues or like work. And whenever I'm not, I don't know, playing with my daughter and having, well, I don't know, conversations with my wife and cleaning the dishes, yeah, this is the default mode for me. So when I'm not doing, I don't know, those things, the default operating is like, and I'm always like a sponge. And for example, you know, I'm washing the dishes and I'm listening to a lecture. I drive my wife mad. You're not present. You have your headsets and you're moving around the house like a madman. Yes, honey, but listen, do you know about paranoid narcissism?
Yeah.
Dostoevsky created this, you know. I mean, like I find that yeah, fascinating. And that,
You were talking earlier about meditation, and I was quite surprised to hear you saying that reading information is your meditation, because it's always about removing all the sources of input in the meditation. I was wondering, have you ever experimented, or would you ever experiment staying a day or more without any sources of information, of books, internet, nothing? What do you think would happen?
that would be interesting. I should do that experiment. I haven't tried it, but yeah, sounds like an interesting experiment. Yeah, I can't remember a day when that actually happened.
Let us know in the next episode.
I just want to mention that if people have questions, they can write them, and I will get them, so don't hesitate. But otherwise, I was curious how you were growing up. Like, do you feel like somebody ingrained in you the desire to read or to gather information, or is this something you developed on yourself, or is it part of school or parents, or?
Yeah, I don't think it was cool. It was
No?
probably my. Yeah, no, certainly wasn't
Okay.
school. I mean, like, school is not the best avenue for getting to knowledge. No, it was probably the house that I grew up. My dad. I grew up surrounded by books. So I grew up in the 80s. There was no internet or computers, but I had books everywhere. I had books in my kitchen. I had books on the hallway. So, and that was the main entertainment for me growing up, because it wasn't like the late 80s or early 90s was great TV, especially in Romania where I grew up. So it was a few hours of crappy television, and that was it. And if you wanted to have fun at home, books was the only option for me, at least. I mean, like, and I picked books not to get bored, and then when I had access to multiple media, I picked those up as well. But yes, I mean, growing up surrounded by books is probably how I got started.
And how do you split your reading time between fiction and non-fiction, and what are, because you know, I think at a first glance we usually think of non-fiction as the more informative and so on, but there could also be an argument for fiction revealing things in a way that non-fiction doesn't. like the deeper.
I love fiction. I always there's always some fiction that
The
I'm
lie,
that I'm
yeah.
that I'm reading, and I think there is some fiction which is probably more important than non-fiction work. So there are probably, I don't know, my favorite books fiction-wise are quite meaty in terms of, I don't know, informational content. I don't know, the Bible is a fiction if you think about it, and it was quite impactful. And I think telling something with meaning in a story format, it's much harder and much more impactful than trying to write like an academic paper or like, I don't know, like a popular science book and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I'm into fiction a lot, and science fiction, of course, because there are a lot of interesting philosophy in science fiction. But yeah, like recently I read Leela from Robert Piercing, which is I don't know, it's like a fiction, but not really. I mean, the story here, it's quite simplistic, an encounter between a boatman and a girl, but it's quite philosophical book. It's about like value. It's a metaphysics. It's about the metaphysics of quality, and yeah, I think it's quite masterful that he could discuss about those topics in the context of a real story. Dune is the same that we have been discussing. It's like, what makes people religious? What is the philosophy behind the Messiah? I think that discussion is quite meaningful, and being presented as I don't know, like space lords with lasers and stuff like that. That makes it quite interesting. No?
And it definitely helps you in real life, in day-to-day life. But I was wondering also, like, if there any, if you see an impact also in your business decisions, for example, or if you also maybe you inform yourself because you enjoy it. Yeah, I get that. But if you also inform yourself in order to, I don't know, make better decisions in business, or if you notice if it helps you.
I think so. You would have to ask my colleagues of how effective I am. I would say it definitely helps, because it creates much more clear conversations. So for example, like, I don't know, I read this book on discovery habits. This is a very technical book, right? It is about an area of product management called customer discovery, and it talks about a methodology and how to structure the team and how to organize it and blah, 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 blah. And I read it because this is something useful for what we're doing at the company right now. But as I read it and took these very, I don't know, detailed and specific notes, it allowed me to be quite I don't know, to have a much more informed conversation. I didn't go into the office the next day and was like, dudes, I read this amazing new book, it's awesome, you should read it too. No, I was like, there were these ideas, and I think they are pretty cool, and let me talk about it with a level of precision that makes my communication actionable. And I don't trust my intuition or my emotional responses. I take notes, and when I talk about it, I try to be specific, so when we decide to act on it, we know exactly what we're doing. So I think that's very important, because a lot of our communication is async. These days, we're all connected on Slack, and it's so easy for things to be lost in translations. I think you meant that. It wasn't clear what you meant by that, or so especially when in companies like ours, where we're dealing with like innovation and there's a lot of like uncertainty, being precise with language and trying to communicate at the right level of resolution, it's quite important, I would say.
But I'm curious, related to Isabella's question, like if she's asking if all this impacts your business decisions, for example, but would a business book actually impact your decision more, or a book completely unrelated to business?
I don't I don't have that clear distinction
No.
in my head. So I don't think there is this thing called work-life balance. For me, it's always like a hippie thing that I never really understood. For me, work and life are the same thing. And when I'm reading like history, for example, it's not like I'm entertaining now. No, I mean, like, there's a lot of like historical examples that I use to communicate business concepts. I don't know, one of the mottos of my previous company at Uberview, we were a very tech-focused team, and it was my love for the war between Hannibal and the Romans that got our motto, which was, what?
What motto?
The Hannibal said is, "We'll find a way or we'll make a way."
Oh, okay.
And it was very representative for the ethos of our team on how we should persevere. And we were struggling with some very, I don't know, complicated tech challenges, and everyone was so inspired. I told them the story on how Hannibal crossed the Alps and how he said that and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And we actually wrote it down and we put it over the door. And I don't know, that was more of a, I don't know, like a leadership story that I was able to communicate, I think, pretty well.
I was having a curiosity now as you were talking, coming back a bit to the subject of news. If you were to incorporate these ideas of maybe adding deeper meaning, and you were criticizing before a bit that we're all a bit vulnerable to the news because it touches some emotional triggers, and that's not necessarily the best way to inform ourselves with the emotional triggers on. How would you change the way the news are delivered? If you were to be, I don't know, the director
for it to affect you, I guess.
Well, I don't know, because I'm not into news, but I think the problem of fake news, for me, it's not a systemic problem.
Okay.
It's not a problem that we should approach at the level of a country, a government, or a huge corporation. It's a personal problem. It's a me problem. I think we all have to take it upon ourselves to be mindful with what we're paying attention to, rather than to demand the companies and who are creating the addiction for us to change.
Okay, so it's more about accountability.
Exactly,
and
yes.
Responsibility over yourself rather than,
Yeah, if I think that Facebook can damage my mental health, I will try not to use Facebook rather than demand that Facebook changes its algorithms. Like, who am I to demand anything? Like, this is a free product that some company in California put out that I can use or not use. And for me, coming up with demands feels, it lacks pragmatism, because I know that me raising a fist and going on Facebook to complain about Facebook and doing like that whole hypocrisy game of virtue signaling, it's pointless. Like, I should not go on Facebook and maybe, I don't know, read a book instead. Like, maybe that would be the way out.
But follow-up curiosity, and then I'll let
Capucine. Question from go ahead.
Many curiosities, but maybe I don't know if you have kids, but let's say you had a teenager. If you had a teenager, would you allow them to take this decision themselves, whether to use or not use Facebook, or would you somehow impose some rules?
I'll see when I get there. My daughter is she's 6 years old. She doesn't have a phone, and I'll see what I'll do when I get there. But what I noticed with kids is, and it was certainly true for me growing up, they emulate what they're seeing inside the house. So my role here, of course, is to be a good guardian, but it's also to be like a good role model. So I don't think I could be a very credible, I don't know, guardian and be like, yeah, you shouldn't be on Facebook when I'm checking Facebook on my phone all day long. I mean, like, and I see that with a lot of parents. So, yeah, hopefully I'll be someone that is worth emulating. There's that quote, like, I don't know, be the person that your dog thinks you are. That's kind of, you know,
My
motto.
yeah, but yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking.
I'll just put a question from Andre. I was wondering, how do you internalize something that you read and find interesting? Like, if you read a philosophical idea you like, do you apply it to your lifestyle right away or have in any habit?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily stash things that I agree with.
Okay,
So
that's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, there are some things that I like that I fundamentally disagree with that I just think are just beautifully presented, or I like, I don't know, there is an artistic beauty of it. So, for example, I like the Communist Manifesto, right? The book. I'm a libertarian. I'm the most anti-communist person ever. But I know reading that book is such a concise, well-written book, and I understand why it was popular. You know, so I probably stashed some ideas from the Communist Manifesto.
Almost aesthetic.
Yeah, it has exactly. It has aesthetic. So I don't know, like. Plato versus Aristotle, right? I'm more Aristotelian in my approach, but Plato is such an aesthetically pleasing philosopher. He has stories. He has these dialogues. Aristotle, I couldn't read the guy. I mean, like, he's brilliant, but like, he's unreadable. And so yeah, I don't necessarily connect just with ideas that I agree with.
Which is super important.
And I revisit them a lot. Like, I go over my stashes and ideas, and I scroll through them, but the best way to incorporate them is in conversations.
Right. Yeah.
Is in chatting with other people and having this like intellectual.
But
engagement.
it's interesting how deep stash is so evident in even how you speak. I've never had a conversation with you without you at least referencing 5 very specific things, and I'm like, miracle if I remember somebody's name, you know. So
yeah, I'm very bad with names.
Probably if
well.
I use deep stash, it would change.
Yeah. Hopefully, yes.
Yeah. Well, we have 1 minute left apparently. So last thought.
I was wondering whether you have sources of information you pay for, if you want to say.
Yeah, I mean, like, I pay for Kindle and my Audible subscription, and I pay for Curiosity Stream. It's like a documentary channel. I use it mostly for my daughter because she likes dinosaurs. There are quite a few dinosaurs documentaries there. But yeah, that's about it. I'm not into any, I don't know, fancy tools, subscription-wise.
Got it. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
We definitely need to take some stashes out of the conversation.
Yeah, but I'm happy to close this conversation on the idea of keeping still things that we disagree with. And I'm curious, but maybe that's for another time, if there are any stashes that you felt one way when you stashed them, and then maybe a few years later you felt differently.
If you want me, I can tell you the story, but I'm not sure if we have the time.
I don't think so, but but thank you very much.
Tell us all the things you change your mind about, and maybe how the experiment goes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.